Cloud. There we go. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for another edition of Between Two Rocks. We have local Roanoke small business owners Rebekah Murphy and Sam Thompson. And joining us today is City Council candidate Danny Clawson. And we are very, very excited to learn more about Danny. I know that it's been a quick turn into the election, so we're very excited to learn where Danny stands on all of these crazy fun issues that we have in Roanoke. So with that, I will hand it off to Sam to take it away.
Sure. Thank you for being with us, Danny.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we'll just start with a little basic introduction. If you want to tell us what made you decide to run for city council and why should people vote for you?
Awesome. So for those that haven't met me yet, my name is Danny Clawson. I am currently the executive director of the Virginia Harm Reduction Coalition, and I use they, them pronouns. And the reason I'm running, so we have a saying in my family that our favorite sport is politics. I've always been a politically and civically engaged person. I like when I was like 14 years old, I did this like presidential classroom thing where I like went to Washington, D.C. and like, went around all the big white pillared halls and I was hooked ever since then. So I've always been politically engaged and a community activist, but I think the reason, so it's like I've always cared about politics and I've thought about running for years, but I think the reason that I'm choosing in this moment to run is that I've seen a really nasty turn in the political discourse around unhoused people specifically, and people with substance use disorder more broadly. And that really, really concerns me, both for the safety and well-being of the people that I care about, but also just for the kind of city that I want to live in. And so I think that's what really motivated me to run now, in this time and place. And I I'm a real policy nerd, and something that has always really bothered me about more conservative machinations is the idea that government is bad and that government causes harm. A lot of times, government does cause incredible harm, but there's been a real attack over the last 25 years of the idea of government doing good. And I firmly believe that government can and should make people's lives better. That's why it exists. And I'm really, really passionate about uh, creating policies and systems that protect and help people over corporations. And so, yeah, it's the time is now. The apocalypse is at our doorstep, and as somebody who cares a lot about environmental justice, the tide has to shift at this point if we're going to survive. So thanks.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you. That definitely gives us a lot more insight and places to go with. Um, And we know a lot about your work that you do with the Harm Reduction Coalition, which
Yep.
is an amazing thing. Um, so we can kind of tie that into where we start here. So we have in our city seen a lot of shutdown or limited outreach to our unhoused population, which is a lot of what you serve. And in part, a lot of that has been at the request of local business owners. Can you tell us about? We obviously have opinions about those things, but what's kind of your reaction to that, and what do you think that we can maybe do, or you could do on city council to improve that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly, incredibly disappointed with the Planning Commission's choice to uh, first cite TLOTs for their services that they're doing, but then also denying their appeal. I just think it's unconscionable. And to me, it feels like a stretch, saying that this is a full-time shelter because you have lockers outside or a porta potty. I mean, I think that is up to interpretation, and they could have interpreted it a different way. In terms of what I can do at the city council, even before that, even if the primaries in 6 weeks, no matter what happens there and in the general election, there's still things that we can be doing to support TLOT right now. I think TLOT needs to apply for an exemption, because once it comes, if they apply for an exemption for the zoning that they're operating under, then that would go before planning commission again, but this time we could have the same level of community support, and it wouldn't be interpreting the letter of the law. It's saying, no, this is an important community service and we should make an exception for them. And then that would go before city council. If I was on city council by the time that came forward, obviously I would vote to support TLOT. We serve the same people. They go to both places. They go to the Harm Reduction Coalition and TLOT, and the services they provide are vital. And again, the thing that is crazy to me is that they are, out of their own money, out of the community's money, out of their donors and supporters, they're paying for porta potties and these vital services that people need. And, I think the city should be saying thank you, because then the city doesn't have to do it on their dime. I also think the city can be doing more. I think a lot of the pressure for social services and safety net services in this city is actually on nonprofit institutions. And it's a really tight budget year. I'm not saying that there aren't very real financial realities that we have to deal with, but we need to be prioritizing social services in our budget and be doing more work to take the strain off of our safety net institutions. Food pantries are running very low. The rescue mission is very full. They're dealing with renovations. We had to marshal, there was 10 service organizations that all came together to have warming shelters all over the city in February, TLOT being one of them. The
And the city
low,
asked for their help with that, didn't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they did. They did. And so I think, I'm a part of an ecosystem of incredible organizations like Ram House, TLOT, Rescue Mission. We call it the Chicken Church here in Southeast, does food on Wednesdays and Thursdays. St. Mark's does. I mean, all these organizations across the city are doing really good work in trying to serve people that are really down and out. And the city should be helping more with that instead of just relying on them to take care of it.
Well, I know you mentioned that TLOT is having to flip the bill for the porta potties and everything, but now they're also having to pay for a lawsuit against the
Yeah,
city.
yeah. I hadn't heard about the lawsuit yet.
That was
I'm
just
really sad that it's
yesterday.
come to that.
Yeah.
That's really, really unfortunate. And yeah, I think different choices could have been made. And if I'm elected, I will be the champion of supporting, protecting, and uplifting our social safety net service providers.
Well, and it's hard because, you have the business owners down there too, that have been filing these complaints. And as a council member, you have to answer to both business owners and the unhoused population. So how would you manage that?
Yeah, so I met with Mayor Cobb about this in January, because we were starting to hear these kind of rumblings of unhappy business owners. And the thing that has been the most surprising for me is that the primary complaint is the visibility of unhoused and poor people. We were not hearing about, oh, they vandalized my property, or they're, you know, coming in and causing a disruption or anything like that. It was literally just, I don't want to see them. And I think that's problematic for many reasons. But in terms of working with business owners, I think a lot of what can be done, I don't think in our current social framework, we don't prioritize having conversations that bridge the divide. There's a participant advisory board at VHRC of unhoused people, and they are very intelligent, competent, skilled speakers. And I really think that if we could get the business owners in the room with our peer leaders who can talk about their experience and what they're dealing with, unhoused people are not scary. People with substance use disorder are not scary. Uh, and I think we need to be working on a social scale of putting the unhappy business owners and the unhoused people in the same room and helping people get to know each other better and understand that unhoused people are not a threat to anybody in this community, least the businesses.
Totally with you on all of that. I was trying to think of like a way to word it that isn't offensive to somebody. So I agree with you completely.
I mean, hey, this is HiRoanoke. You do what you want, right?
Well, I don't, yeah, you know, it's disheartening when people's privilege wins.
Yeah, and that's tale as old as time. People with power and money um get to define the playing field. But I've spent my career advocating for progressive policies in very conservative jurisdictions, and I like have really learned the power of like sitting down and sharing your personal story, right? People can be so cruel and shut down and hold just the most reprehensible assumptions. But when you sit down and tell them your story and the way uh, a policy impacts them and the struggle, I think people are basically good. Like, I genuinely believe that humans are inherently good. And what we have to do is appeal to their humanity and educate. And like, I'm a health educator. And I have found over and over and over again that when you sit across from somebody who's been antagonistic to you and tell them your story, it really does soften them. And I really think we need more of that in Roanoke.
Agreed. Well, and we're a vast majority of the city is one missed paycheck away from becoming unhoused themselves.
Yeah.
Almost every candidate this cycle is saying affordability and fiscal responsibility. That's easy to say. You run a nonprofit on grant and state funding, so you know what a real budget constraint feels like. What does fiscal responsibility mean to you specifically with a number or a trade-off attached?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, you need to have really good financial oversight. I think the way the city got into this situation is the council was not doing their due diligence in really digging into the numbers, right? It would be, as an executive director, it would be very easy for me to pull together some very nice, pretty numbers for my board and make it all look fine and dandy. But I could never get away with that because my board chair goes through every single line of the financial report. And if he's like, okay, line 57 over here, you have this balance. What's that about? Right. And so I think that's what should have been happening and what needs to happen at the city level is we need to be fully reading financial reports and asking the tough questions of city staff. I think in terms of evaluating trade-offs, I've been disappointed with some of the choices that have been made around education funding in our city, but I think one of the issues that the current council and city employees are getting hung up on is I think they have a habit of like making like laying it all out on the table, making all of their decisions in private, and then like submitting the solutions to the public. And when you're cutting budgets, there needs to be a little bit more transparency there. And one of the things that I'm really supportive of is the collective bargaining for teachers, because if we had collective bargaining for teachers and a organizing body like REA was able to be at the table having these budget conversations, they could tell you the negative impact of cutting a certain program, or they could say, yes, I hear you that this building is out of date, but we as the educators that work and teach in that building are saying this is the more important thing to prioritize. We can handle, an outdated building. And because you don't have those frontline workers in the conversations, choices are being made that are not what's best for the teachers, not what's best for the students or the schools. And so I think, when you're talking about fiscal responsibility at VHRC, every penny that comes in and goes out, I have to track and have a receipt attached to for my funders. And I don't get the luxury of like debt servicing and being able to take out all these big debts, right? You figure out what it takes to do something before you start that project, and then you execute. And you can write into grants what we call de minimis or indirect, where you have kind of a little bit of a buffer if things are more expensive than you anticipate. But I think in the coming years where things are getting a lot tighter and we're going into a pretty challenging economy, we need to stop greenlighting things with the, oh, we'll take care of it on the back end. We'll do the math later, right? We need to make sure that we can pay for something start to finish before we greenlight it. And
Which
if we
makes me,
can't, then we don't do it.
I think the fire trucks was a good example of that,
Yeah,
where they
yeah,
bought, was it three for 3.9 million,
yeah,
something like that, and then
yeah.
forgot to figure out how they were going to pay for it.
Now, I will say my understanding of, wait, they weren't able to pay for it
No,
afterwards?
they had to add it to the debt this year, because
Oh, really?
if they defaulted on it, they had to pay, I think, like 40% of what they owed
Uh-huh.
as a penalty. So I mean, you might as well. Yeah,
Oh, fascinating.
it is
Fascinating.
very fascinating.
That was not the what I was told is that there was a budget spend down, that the grant funds were going away if we didn't spend, which I can definitely tell you all about as a nonprofit director, where,
Yes.
it's the end of the year and the government comes to you and says, hey, can you spend $40,000 in 2 months? And I say, yes, I can. And I find a way to do it. But it sounds like that's not what was going on there.
Yeah, it was approved in, like, I think December 2024, and in
Oh,
that
wow.
time
Okay.
frame it wasn't planned for, I
Yeah.
guess.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
so anyways,
Mistakes were made. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So tying into that same sort of position, we know that the council voted to give themselves an 87, 90% pay raise, along with
Hmm.
the massive budget cuts to our parks department, to our schools, obviously.
Yeah.
A lot of positions cut citywide and our CPS wise. And, we spoke with someone who said that despite that raise, we're still getting a bargain on what our council members are making us pay. What's your takeaway from that?
Yeah. I mean, it's not a good look. And when you look at the grand scheme of things, I think they increased it by $10,000. 50,000 or $60,000 when you're talking about $1 million deficit, um, is not going to make a huge difference. However, in terms of the public trust and feeling like the government is willing to make sacrifices for the public, right? That really calls a choice like that calls that into question. I think the we're getting it for a bargain. It's a I think for me, I care deeply about livable wages, right? And so having a livable wage for a city council position or increasing that then makes it easier for people that aren't personally wealthy to be in government, right? So I think having a reasonable salary that somebody could live off of in order to serve the people, I think that's good policy. But again, the timing matters. And when you're cutting vital programs, and people are losing their jobs, it doesn't matter if it doesn't take a huge bite out of that issue. It's not appropriate. It's not the right time. So
Agreed. I think that one
Yep.
stands out to me mostly because in 2008 or 2009, after council had given themselves a pay raise back then and the budget was in a bad place, they took a
mm,
5% decrease, which, like, okay, you're doing something. It's
right, right.
Because at the end of
Yeah.
the day,
Because
you're a public servant and you have to do what's best for everybody.
yeah, and I think there's easy, like, okay, we're voting to do this in 2 years, right? That it's like this needs to happen. You can pass a policy without enacting it in the same year that you're cutting essential services, right? So uh, again, I think better choices could have been made.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting seeing sitting council members demonstrating with REA, which, I love seeing that, but our council has the power to locally give them collective bargaining.
Yes, and as well as the fire department. And the fire department has
Yes.
submitted a letter of intent to the council. And if I'm elected and that's still an issue, like I would enthusiastically support collective bargaining. I think the claim by Spanberger's administration that they can't afford it is the most disingenuous argument because collective bargaining means that you have to operate within the budget that you have. It doesn't mean that
Mhm.
you can ask for money that has not been generated as revenue. If the city doesn't have it, you can't demand it, right?
Yeah.
So I think, and when we allow collective bargaining, when the workers are taken care of, they provide better services, which means better care for our community and better health and wellness all around. So I am such a strong proponent of unions, of collective bargaining. Um, I I'm not even afraid to say things like wealth district redistribution. I think society should exist for everybody, not just the privileged, wealthy
Well,
few.
and from my understanding too, like it's not always just about the pay. Like I know at the teachers, part of what they're wanting is it's
Yes.
called duty-free lunch. Like they actually get a break to
Yeah.
themselves at lunch.
Yeah.
Um, which, yeah, I think they should get that.
Exactly. I mean, my wife is a resident, and I get so spicy because the entire medical system is built on the backs of residents that I think when she breaks it down, she's making like $3 an hour. The labor that they provide, our healthcare systems could not survive without residents, but they work them to the bone and they don't have labor rights. All the time I'll hear things that I'm like, pretty sure that's a violation of labor law, but because it's education, right? So like all these kind of loopholes that the system is set up to protect wealthy people and grind workers more. I just really, it really gets my blood boiling. And yeah, exactly to what you said, Rebekah. When teachers are collective bargaining, they're usually collective bargaining for their students and their their community to be able to do a
Yep.
better job.
Yep.
okay. So sticking with schools and kind of tying into your work that you do. Obviously, a lot of the kids and the families that you interact with through your job are part of the Roanoke City Public Schools. So, the connection for you, how does that work between how the city is funding the schools based on the I want to say the crises, but the crises that you encounter on a daily basis, I'm sure.
Yeah, so because we're a harm reduction organization, there's pretty strict limitations on like who I can give out Narcan to and how old, are the people that we like legally can serve. So I don't directly interact with students or people under the age of 18 in my day-to-day work. Having said that, the impact of the opioid crisis and the absolute and total lack of mental health care in our communities has it's like I see them as soon as they turn 18, right? Like when the system is failing students, when they are dealing with generational trauma and generational poverty, and they're being raised by their grandmother because their parents passed away from an opioid overdose. We have some of the highest rates of foster kids in foster care in the country around here. I think for me, I have become really, really passionate about making sure that we have wraparound mental health care for students. Um, I see young people that are in my social network starting to rely on substances like cannabis, because that's really accessible, or even nicotine. And they are using it as a crutch already as a child. There are people in my program that first used heroin when they were 11 years old, right? I have like multi generations of like grandma, mom, and daughter all coming all over the age of 18 coming to the van together to get their services. So to me, the way you break that cycle of trauma and generational substance use is by giving young people the social care that they need. And then on top of that, even if you don't have substance use history in your family and you haven't been, victimized by the Sacklers and Purdue Pharma and all these pharmaceutical companies, COVID was an incredibly disrupting experience for young people. It really hampered their ability to develop social skills. It really upped the ante on anxiety, depression, isolation for students that were in less than safe homes, where there might be some domestic violence happening or some emotional abuse happening. They were stuck now in those homes for 24/7. There was no escape. And I don't think our country has really dealt with the long-term impacts of that. So when we're talking about school budgets, we also need to be talking about, one of the ideas that I have is taking the recreational cannabis tax and reinvesting that into wraparound care for students, right? And their families, right? Because it was also like, it's so many parents that were trying to be on the computer working with me on a meeting, and they had like kids in the background that were like hungry and trying to figure out their math problem. And I mean, like everybody was traumatized by COVID, and we just don't talk about it. We didn't do anything. We just like went back to normal. It's work time now. Um, so
And
yeah, I think students need a lot of help, and we need to be giving them more help.
the teachers are still dealing with the fallout for that of
Yeah.
that for sure. And I
And they
don't
put their lives on the line. Like we didn't have a
yeah.
vaccine. We didn't like they were in these schools, parents pushing back saying no masks. Like, I mean, yeah, what teachers and schools went through during that, what everybody went through. Yeah.
Well,
Sorry,
and
I cut you off.
I don't think that some people, because I know it was shocking for me to learn this myself, but the social net of services that the schools provide. I mean, last year there were 747 students experiencing homelessness in Roanoke City schools.
Yeah.
Over 9,000 identified as economically disadvantaged. So when they are losing services like activity buses or two-thirds of
Lunch and
3-year
breakfast.
preschools. They still have the lunch and breakfast, but they've lost preschool for, I think they went from like 9 3-year preschool classes to 3. And then they'll only have activity buses in the spring because
Mm.
there's more usage of the activity buses then. And so, these students that really relied on those services and don't have other options, that's when you're really going to start seeing a fallout.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it's like you don't have to cut, like we had very real budget constraints, but you don't have to cut every department equally, you know?
Well,
I
and
think,
then you go back to like the raises and stuff. That's why it's, yeah, on actual numbers, it's not a big hit to the overall budget, but symbolically,
yeah,
it's icky.
yeah.
Well, I think it ties back into grant funding also
Yeah.
and not properly utilizing that.
Yeah.
So I would like your opinion on the way that the city is spending the opioid settlement funding.
Hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on how that could be improved?
I haven't looked, because full disclosure, VHRC receives grant funding from the Opioid Abatement Authority. And in the past, we've received city funding from COVID and ARPA funds and stuff like that. I think when I first came to Roanoke, so I moved here in 2020 because my wife got into medical school here, and then I took over VHRC in 2021. And when I first kind of got into the funding game, like, became the director and was like looking at like grant, we call them NOFOs, notice of funding opportunities or requests for proposals, RFPs. And so I was like on the city website being like, where do I go? Where are the RFPs? Where do I go for NOFO? Like I'm, trying to, build next year's budget. And there was like nothing. And I learned that it was like, oh, we just have these legacy organizations that we fund every year. And it was all I was very new. I didn't know all the players, but I'm like, I've worked in nonprofit for 20 years and I have never seen that it's just, oh, the city manager just chooses where money goes. It was very strange to me. Um, do a little bit more digging, find out a little bit more. And I think that's what a lot of the pain and suffering that we're experiencing at a government level for the city right now is, related back to that previous city manager and the lack of oversight that he had. So historically, I would say it's not great. What I will say is that now, Helen Ferguson, who is kind of the in charge of grants at the city, is putting in a lot of uh sorely needed structure, right? So, it used to you got all your money up front. Now they're taking it, their grant disbursements are going to be monthly reimbursements, right? So I have to submit all of my receipts ahead of time and then the city reimburses me instead of just saying, here's your award, give us a general ledger at the end of the year. It's also becoming much more rigorous with like a rubric and a selection committee, which I really, really appreciate. And I think some people are bucking that. Some organizations don't like that they have to put in all this extra effort and work to get funding and, prove themselves to the city. But I think it's absolutely what should be happening with public money. And I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. In terms of who was funded, I know most of like we work with most of the organizations that were also funded. I don't remember it was like 10 or 11 grants for the opioid abatement funds. This last time, I don't remember every single one. But overall, I think people, there was a rigorous selection process for the funding and I feel confident in that.
Good. Yep. I was looking over like all of the qualifications and the scorecard, and it did look like
It's
it had
much more
improved
transparent.
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Although,
normal government funding because that's like to me that's how government funding is. And Roanoke wasn't doing that when I got here, and I'm like, this is government funds, guys. This is
right. Well,
so.
and I mean, we can see that, some of those old ways still shine through in things like the audits of the gun violence prevention committee.
Yeah.
Where, friends and family are getting paid
Yeah.
city money. So I guess kind of on that, with budget and with our city council members being on the audit committee and with us still not having a completed audit for 2025. So this 2026 to 7 budget is truly based on estimates. We don't know that what we're basing our spending on is even accurate. Do you think that there's enough accountability being had by our current sitting members?
I don't think I have enough information to, make a clear assertion on that. So I won't, I don't want to speak out of pocket if I don't have all the information. What I will say is that we are moving in the right direction in terms of transparency. I don't really know if it's typical for council members to be on an audit committee. So that's why I don't know what's like normal for that. But I will say that in terms of audits, it's not uncommon for audits to take up to a year, especially when you're looking at $1 million budgets. I think I'm glad the audits are happening. I think it is demonstrating ways that we need to improve. And I think it just goes back to the lack of oversight historically and currently. And that as all of these things come to light, as we finish the audits, auditing is a very rigorous process, right? We have to get an audit every year. And, we're a $2 million organization, and there's very like clear standards and things that you have to go through to complete an audit. And that is a very lengthy process. So I look forward to the results of that. And especially if you have some inconsistencies like we've already seen in what has been released, it's going to take longer. But I would rather have it take a long time and be correct and turn over every stone than to be rushed and incomplete.
Agree. I guess from my standpoint, I just kind of wish we could get like some sort of update that like, because at this point
Yeah.
I'm like, is anyone doing anything right now? Because it's just crickets.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I'm like, I don't feel like I know enough to say what is happening with that. But if I'm elected, I will more than happy to provide regular updates, even if it is, yeah, they're about halfway through the transactions that they have to run through. They're about halfway, even
Yeah.
just stuff like that of like, yep, it's ongoing. They're working on it. We meet every month about it or every week. Like even just sharing that I think is important.
Agreed. Agreed.
Um, well, in the city, asking about Flock, they expanded their surveillance footprint, including the Flock camera system, on a council vote a lot of the community was angry about. The populations you serve are some of the most heavily policed and surveilled people in the city. Where do you stand on that expansion?
100% opposed to Flock and Raven. I think it's difficult because, you know, certain areas of the city, Southeast being one of them, Northwest being another, um, are subject to more violence because poverty breeds violence, right? But like literally, it's not a difference in people. It's not a different in the community, the quality of the community, or any of that kind of stuff. It's that when people don't know have enough means to support themselves, by definition, they will turn to crime because crime is better than dying, right? Crime, you have to survive somehow, right?
Mhm.
And so when we're talking about violent crimes in our communities, um, what we need to be doing is investing in community policing and social support systems, right? That's where the money needs to be going instead of surveillance. Having said that, I want to be respectful of the family members and the community members that have lost um, people to gun violence and be respectful of what they are asking for. And I want to, I don't want to like say
Are
that
they
they're
asking
wrong
for that
for
though?
wanting. I mean, that's what I've been hearing is that there are community members specifically that have lost family members to gun violence that feel that if the police had gotten there sooner or faster, that the outcome would be different. I don't think the outcome would be different, right? I think that even if the police were able to get there faster, um, gun violence is a social failing, and I think policing after the fact is a band-aid on a gaping wound, right? So we need to be investing in social care and social support and programs for young people, kind of like what Baltimore has been doing. They have a program that uses what they're called violence interrupters, which are respected members of the community that are engaged in violent activities, and they work with and train respected members of gangs or criminal enterprises to get them to stop the violence. And so instead of having a cop come in trying to stop the violence, it's a community member that's trying to
Mhm.
stop the violence. It's been incredibly effective. Um, Baltimore is experiencing double-digit drops in violent crime. So that's the kind of stuff that we need to be investing in, not flock in terms of my values. And so I want to be respectful of people that have lost those to gun violence and what they're asking for. In terms of my values and what I think will work, Flock and Raven are so risky on a variety of levels. Not only is it bad to have state surveillance, that just does not lead to healthy communities. I've lived in 27 or been to 27 countries, and I lived in Romania, which for those that don't know, the KGB was jealous of the surveillance system in Soviet Romania. And I was there right after the Soviet Union fell. So I have seen highly surveilled societies, and they are not well, right? That is not what we should be looking for. And that is not what will keep our community safe. Then you put on top of that that these systems are insanely insecure. They're insecure from stalkers, they're insecure from foreign agents, they're insecure from, just any old bad actor that wants to harm people and harm communities. So I don't think surveillance is the answer at baseline. And most especially, Raven and Flock are terrible companies. They are dishonest in their advertisement. Quite frankly, I think they should be taken to court.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason that Stanton and Charlottesville and Martinsville all decided to get rid of them. So,
Yeah,
and the grant that they're using for that actually could have been used for actual like assistance to the community, not
exactly.
surveillance, which
Yeah.
seemed to be
And it's
news
hard because that's
to some of
that's
the
the
council
longer
members.
path, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's easy to put in a camera if that and say like if somebody's saying that makes me feel more safe, that's bing bang boom, easy way. Uh it takes time and effort. I think Baltimore, everybody's talking about Baltimore right now. They started implementing the policies that are bearing fruit right now in 2004. It takes a long time to create these healthy communities, but it, you got to start at some point. And if we don't start now, where are we going to be in 20 years with a rising fascist government in the White House? Like, we can't be messing around with this stuff right now. So yeah, it's going to take a long time, but we need to be investing in that social programming now.
Agreed.
Absolutely. All right. Try and hit another topic here, veering off a little bit, and I'm going to let you run with it kind of how you want to. So obviously everyone knows about the casino proposal and all of the lovely information that the city knows about it because of the transparency that our council has given us with the NDAs that they signed
Yay,
and
NDAs.
and the city money that's been spent to lobby for something that we don't know anything about. But give us like your takes on, I don't know, the casino overall, if you want to do that, Berglund Center, other
Would you
options
like
that
a
we
casino
have.
in Roanoke?
uh you know do you think it's a good idea for council members to sign NDAs with casino companies? You take whatever portion of that you want to run with.
Sounds good. I do have thoughts on the casino. So as a
Yeah,
harm
you
reductionist, I
I
mean,
don't at
it was
all,
like
if you can't tell.
I'll tell you what, it was the first thing that I got asked when I announced I was running because it was the hot topic back in this winter. Yeah, I mean, so as a harm reductionist, right, I'm not a moralist, right, or a moral absolutist. So I don't have the same feelings of like, think of the children, the vice, the drinking, the gambling, it's all bad, right? I think things like drugs and alcohol and gambling are value neutral things. It's the choices that humans make around those that can cause harm, right? So I'm not opposed to a gaming institution by right. I'm open to that if that's what the people want. But overwhelmingly, everything that I've learned about this deal, and huge shout out to the Rambler and the work that they did uncovering a lot of this stuff. It sounded like a bad deal from the start, and it really feels like the city got fleeced. From what I understand, it was like a B grade, like not very respected gaming company
Yeah.
that approached the city. And when I've talked to people like Councilman McGuire, he was talking to me about, I think it was Councilman McGuire. He was talking to me about how other localities like Danville or Bristol that have instituted, casinos and allowed gaming enterprises there, that it was like an open bid, right? That all these different companies across the country bid to do their casino in that locality. So if we were to move forward with the casino, I absolutely think it should be an open bid for a variety of reasons. One, if you have all these companies saying this is what we should do with the Berglund Center, then you get all this free research and development, right? Because they're coming up with all the ways and the plans of what we can do, and then we get to pick and choose what we like out of that, right? I also think we shouldn't be limiting it to just casinos, right? There is a really great sport fan culture here. Any bar you walk into right now, it's all FIFA World Cup. I go see the roller derby at the Berglund. I love going to the hockey games there. I wasn't like knew much about hockey, but it's so accessible and affordable, so that even before the heated rivalry craze, I went to a few hockey games with my family when they were in town, and it was so much fun. So I think we have a lot of opportunities to develop it as a sports franchise and get more sport teams in here, athletic teams. I also think we live in the heart of Appalachia, where there is a totally unique music genre of bluegrass here that was created right here. And we have amazing venues like the Exchange and Five Points Music Sanctuary. People love music around here. They're willing to go to Floyd Fest and hang out in the rain and the mud to see music up in the mountains. We should be able to get that same kind of energy here. So I think with the Berglund Center and I think with casino and gaming, I think it needs to be an open, competitive process. I think the residents need to be involved in that process, because this was the thing that I found out through all of this. It was wild to me, is that we can't even move forward with a casino without legislative approval. How are you going to get legislative approval if the city is divided on whether they even want this? Why would a legislature put in the time and energy and effort to approve a bill when we have very short legislative sessions, and it's a lot of work to get a bill through the two houses and all the committees in each of those, the Senate and the House, all the committees, all the work. Like I worked in legislation at the Georgia State Legislature for 3 to 4 years. It's a lot of work and there's very little time. So why would a legislature green light and spend their time and energy on this bill when the city doesn't even know if they want the whole thing felt backwards from the start for me. And I think, again, if that's what the people want is a casino, I'm not going to stand in the way of that, but I think we can get a better deal and we should be getting a better deal if that's what the constituencies want.
Yeah, and currently none of our legislators actually support it, both Democrat and
Right.
Republican.
Yeah. And that says a lot.
Yeah.
But, the city paid for lobbying firms, among other things.
Yeah.
So we're spending
Again,
money on things that people don't want.
I think they got sell the bill of sale. I think they I you know I don't want to speak ill of potentially my future colleagues, but I think uh if I had to guess, and I don't know because I wasn't in the room, but I think we were looking at the budget crisis and realizing that all of this stuff was going to become public very soon. And I think maybe there was a little bit of panic and a little bit of here's the silver bullet. And there's no such thing as silver bullets in government. It doesn't exist.
Well, and I think what we're seeing with the Berglund Center, Civic Center, the model was never supposed to be like for profit thing.
Mm, yeah,
Um, but they deferred the maintenance on that building for so long that now it's become this critical issue. And that's what the schools have had to do. That's what a lot of the departments in the city, they're having to defer maintenance, and eventually it catches up with you and ends up
yeah,
costing a lot more money.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and I don't feel like that's talked enough about.
yeah. Fair. I'll start talking about it more on the campaign
Okay.
trail.
Right. It seems like it's going to get to a point where it's like, is it worth renovating the Berglund Center at this point, or do we just start over? Because
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
numbers are up there.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is like in terms of like revenue, I mean, first of all, I go to the Berglund Center all the time. It's fine. The bathrooms feel fine. I haven't had a problem with the bathrooms. Maybe I'm sure there's stuff that I don't know. But I enjoy going to the Berglund Center. I enjoy my time there. I enjoy the events that I go to there. We also have these huge parking lots that are hardly ever used. And I don't know, I'm a millennial. We used to go to concerts in parking lots all the time. Like it would be relatively easy to throw up 3 or 4 stages in those parking lots and have a music festival. Like we could create revenue generating events there that weren't don't rely necessarily on the aging infrastructure. I think there can be a lot more creativity when it comes to the Berglund Center.
And it would be so nice to not have to drive 3 hours to go to a concert.
Yeah,
I would really love that.
Well, we used to
right?
have
Yeah.
the fair there every year in the
Yeah.
parking lot,
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. It's
and
like
I just
let's
stopped. I
let's
don't know
use
why.
what we got instead of trying to like pour more money into it, you know?
Right. All right. So we have taken a lot of your time and we hit a lot of good topics, but I know there's a lot of things that we didn't hit. So would love to give you the opportunity to kind of sum up your we know I think your main priorities, but your opinions on a lot of the other hot topics that we haven't hit on that matter to people, you know, like with our parks department and with our police department and et cetera, you know, all the things that people are rambling on about right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you just want to kind of give us a summary about what you hope to accomplish if you are elected, your main priorities, just
Yeah.
hit us.
So, I have, like I said at the top, I have been engaged in policy and civics since I was like 12. Um, uh, West Wing aired when I was 13 years old, and I was in love right off the bat. So I'm the West Wing generation. And I have years of legislative and policy experience to back that up. When I worked at Georgia Equality, my job was to resist anti-trans attacks at the state legislature, as well as mobilize constituents to show up and push back. I come from a working class background. I grew up on church and state welfare, and so I personally understand how these safety net programs are essential to survival and a thriving community. And I think that through my political experience, the thing that I have learned is that uh, people can do the right thing if you give them the opportunity. And if I'm elected, my priorities is to make sure that the first, middle, and last thing that we are focusing on are services and programming that improve the quality of life for the average citizen, for the working class citizen. I've had a job since I was 13 years old. And I worked all through both of my degrees. I had a job. And it has become so much harder to succeed and to survive in the last 10 to 15 years. I graduated during the first recession in 2008, and I feel like we've never, as a society, never recovered from that. There are real challenges coming our way, both with our federal government and with environmental impacts and what we are experiencing in terms of homelessness, substance use disorder, and violence. And yet, Roanoke is a really special place. One of the things that I've traveled all over the world. I've visited 27 countries. I've worked on 3 different continents, and I never thought I was going to settle down ever. I thought I was going to be a wanderer for the rest of my life. And when I came to Roanoke, me and my wife were like, oh yeah, we're going to be here for med school and then on to the next adventure, because we're wanderlust and all of that. And I absolutely fell in love with it. I joke with my staff that I'm an Appalachian wannabe because here's the thing about Appalachia is it's so resilient. It is so self-sufficient. If I had to pick anywhere on this in this country that I feel like can weather the storms that we are experiencing, both literally and figuratively, it is Central Appalachia, right? Seeing the way the community mobilized after Hurricane Helene was one of the most powerful things I have ever seen. People are resilient, they are self-sufficient. If the road gets washed, they get a backhoe and they fix it themselves, right? So if you have this kind of community and this core identity of hard work and in lower income communities, we joke that like have a dollar, give a dollar, right? It's like we're passing the same $20 around because I need help to fill my gas tank this week. So my buddy gives me $5 to do that. And then next week, my buddy needs, $20 to round out his light bill and I give him $20 and we're just all passing the same $5 around, right? But when you have that mentality in a community, incredible things can happen with low resources. So even though we're in budget shortfall and we're looking at hard times ahead, I have absolute confidence that this community can pull together and find a way through. I am an expert at writing grants. I secure $2 million in grants every single year to fund my organization. We can be leveraging grant funds more for Roanoke. And if we take the time to invest in these social services, then we don't need as much policing. We need social workers, more than we need a flock camera, right? So I think what I want to bring to the table as a candidate and as a council person is an experience grounded in reality that is connected to the folks that are struggling the most in this community. And my goal is to make sure that the person that is the most disadvantaged in Roanoke is okay. Because if that person is okay, everybody's okay, right? It's the rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. We have so much to offer. It's beautiful here. You got really compassionate, passionate, committed people. You have a great food scene. You have a great and passionate art scene. There's so much going for Roanoke. I don't think it's going to be very hard to put it all together and to thrive despite everything. So that's what I care about as a candidate. That's why I'm running, because I really do truly believe that government can and should make people's lives better. And that's all I want to do on council, is make people's lives better.
Love to hear it.
Seriously. All right. Well, that wraps up our time. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And we are going to stop recording now, if I can figure it out. Stop recording. There we go. Okay, stop.